Well, welcome everybody. We're excited to be here to share our story behind Holgate Library. Um, we're going to start with just some quick introductions. Twee, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Jeannie. Hi, everyone. My name is Tree Lei. I'm an art associate at Bora. An architect and designer here, and I work on a variety of projects, including civic, cultural, multifamily, K-12, commercial. But libraries are definitely the most cherished type of project I get to work on, and I'm lucky to have gotten the opportunity to touch multiple Multnomah County libraries like Holgate, Midland, and St. John. And I'm happy to be here to talk about St. John today.
Emily?
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Wilson. I'm an associate at Bora as well and an architect focused on civic and educational projects mostly. I was the PA project architect on this one and I saw it through from programming through construction administration. So it was my baby for about 4 years, I think, 3.5 years, and really excited to see it completed and to share the story with all of you.
Hey, my name is Jeannie Lai. I'm a principal at Bora, and I lead many of our cultural and civic projects. Um, we're really excited to be here, and I'm gonna get us started. So, um, I'll start with a little background on Bora. Bora was founded in Portland in 1958, and Portland has remained our home, our only office ever since. We're really inspired by the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest, the culture of craft, and the creativity of the people like you all who live here. Sort of continue to shape really our DNA of our practice. At the core, we design for the public good, creating spaces that are rooted in people, place, and purpose. And that has been our driver since the very beginning. Our focus are mostly in education, arts, and community, and that work takes us across the country as well as through the region here. But beyond all of that, that's the typologies that ties together our work. Our through line for us is really understanding what is unique to each project and bringing that to life in an authentic way. So each of our projects are distinct, they never look the same, and it's something that we're really proud of. What holds ourselves, our commitments to the each of our projects is these three core commitments: climate, health, and equity. Um, they're embedded in our design process. We set clear goals. We test those design ideas through ongoing analysis and measure performance to demonstrate how the building is improving outcomes. So for us, that's how we defined excellence, and we see sustainability and design excellence sort of inseparable. And we're really excited to share Holgate because that's a project that we're really proud of in doing that, meeting our commitments. Our studio brings together architects, interior designers, and graphic designers, allowing us to design with the whole experience in mind, so not just the building itself. Yeah, we're lucky to have our great team. So today, we want to make sure we have a lot to go through. We were going to focus mostly on the thinking and thoughts and process behind some of the work that you might not see in the design submission or just photographs. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper. We feel like we're going through it a lot, so if you guys have questions, we would love it if you use the chat and we will continue to look and we could take questions all the way at the end, but that might help us to keep track of that those questions. So do that if questions come up along the way. A quick background for those who might not know too much about the recent bond. So MCL, one of the county libraries, has operated since 1864. There are 19 neighborhood library locations across the county. It's one of the busiest public library systems in the US. And in November of 2020, voters approved a bond measure that issued a $387 million bond to finance capital projects for renovating, constructing new refreshes, and new libraries across the county. One of the major drivers behind the bond was the realization that as Portland has grown um, a lot throughout, but a lot to the east side of I-205. So 40% of the population is living on the east of 205. But it only had about 24% of the library space, so it was really underserved, and that was something that the bond really wanted to address. Pain points, again, the library was all the libraries were kind of tiny little community libraries. They had small footprints, was really not meeting the needs of, the library serving as meeting space. So there's many of the requests for meeting space use was declined or denied. Only two spaces across all of the 19 branches could hold 100 people, so it wasn't meeting the needs when the programs were really popular. Um, so just constantly lacking the space to support the patrons that were looking for that. So, and then a lot of a key part of the beginning of the bond was an operation center. All of the material now goes through the operation center where they store all the materials and then have a new automated system to really help deliver books to each branch much faster than previously. And then these are, I'm not going to read them, but the capital bond project did provide at the very beginning some really great guiding principles for all of their projects. So that was helpful for our start. I'm going to turn it over to Emily.
Great. Okay, we're going to start with a small history lesson, mostly about the history of Multnomah County libraries to just kind of ground ourselves in where libraries were and how they've been evolving over the last 100 years or so. Next slide, Jeannie. So as you are probably aware, as architects and folks interested in architecture in the early 20th century, the public library was really for housing mostly collections and for quiet study. You know, that's what we all think of still when we think of the library of our childhood or the library of our parents' childhood. And at Multnomah County was no different. These are images from Central Library and Stark Street Library, which no longer exists. But next slide. They also were places for community from the get-go. You know, you see kids and adults sharing space, often small spaces in neighborhoods, trying to read or work or play, and have, form community. I do want to point out here all of the potted plants in this library, which is let me see, which one is this? This is Gresham. I appreciate that, we're still talking about plants and Twee's going to talk about plants. And I think it's kind of amazing that even in these historic images, there's even like a saguaro cactus right in the middle, which is kind of awesome. They were also used for, as a community resource. This is Arletta Library, and it's a baby clinic in 1918. So it's a place for community to both gather for fun events and also to get the resources that they needed. And that continues today. This is the interior of the Selwood branch in the 1960s. A little bit changed in that, it became a lot easier to print media and there were more types of media. So you saw book stacks start to get a little higher, take up more space. But really, the priority was given to like quiet study space and the books. And again, people were still trying to celebrate and have community in these spaces. I think it's amazing to see both of these examples of dancers surrounded by really tall book stacks that, might not even be able to reach the top of. And then, that was the mid-century. As we move to the late 20th century, there's a new challenge. The rise of computer technology and the internet. So suddenly we have even more books, right? There's tons of books in the world now, and we're also trying to provide folks with the resource that they need, that is the internet and the World Wide Web. And how do you cram all of these huge desktop computers in with all the media and balance that? And basically what that resulted in is even more loss of people space and places for people to gather because you just had giant computers on top of every workplace. And still, people were still trying to gather. They were tucked in the corners, learning about spinning wheels. They were learning about baby massage. These are all examples from MCL of folks really just trying to establish community in whatever space they could at the library. So this takes us to kind of the core tenet of this section, which is the third place, which is this idea that you have your home and you have work, and then as a community and as a society, we also need a third place to be and a third place to feel welcome. And I put examples of some of my favorite places in Portland to be and feel welcome in the broader community. Lloyd Center, which sadly is closing, so I'm gonna have to find another another place for that. My kids love to run around those hallways. Laurelhurst Park, I think we all love to get out in nature, and that does feel welcome and open and inclusive for everyone. The new PDX airport, my family and I have found ourselves taking the light rail to the PDX airport just to grab a beer or hang out or climb the stairs when we're feeling, like we need to get some energy out. So it's an amazing resource. And then, of course, coffee shops. I think we all love a coffee shop on a rainy day, on a sunny day. It's just accessible, inclusive, and, low bar for entry or free, hopefully. So how this relates to libraries, and I think it's kind of the revival of libraries and sort of embracing the library as a civic living room is the Seattle Public Library in 2004. I think Rem Koolhaas and his team, really drew upon kind of the experiences and the interviews that they had with the Seattle Public Library system, and found that folks really needed this sort of indoor civic living room, especially in such a rainy place as the Pacific Northwest. A place where they could just walk in the front door and gather. Maybe there's some books there, maybe it's just a bunch of seating, but it really felt welcoming and inclusive, and like a third place. Of course, this building is huge and the living room is ginormous, but so what does this mean as we translate it to MCL and Holgate? Holgate or MCL, all of MCL's square footage before the bond, could have fit inside of Seattle Central's library square footage. So, considering that Seattle and Portland and Seattle and Multnomah County are like not too far off in terms of population, it's kind of amazing that Multnomah was really lacking in all of this space, like Jeannie mentioned, and so Holgate, as part of this, was actually tripled the size of the square footage as part of this bond project. Um, Next slide. Okay, so getting into our little branch library. On the left is the picture of Holgate Library pre-bond. It's built in the 70s. It's actually pretty beautiful inside, and I think I have a picture later, but it's kind of hard to see from the street. The entry is tucked away under a deep canopy. The windows kind of facing Holgate are high clerestory, so you don't have great views in. It's just not a very welcoming sort of front door. It's also blocked by a bit of landscape. So the library needed to triple in size, and we also wanted to retain the same amount of parking for folks to make it for easy to visit. And so we decided to look at a two-story library. And as you can see in the site plan on the right, we kept sort of the location, but expanded it to the east and it emphasized its civic presence on Holgate and also tried to serve as a good neighbor to those residences in the neighborhood and along 79th specifically. So the slight inward folding form of the rectangle creates a welcoming sort of outdoor space and threshold, an entry along Holgate and from the parking lot. It includes space for bikes and resting and the bus stop, and serves really as that threshold from, the public sidewalk to the library front door and into the library. The same sort of strategy held true for the interior as well. in terms of like this, the library being a third place, we really needed to make more space for people. That's kind of what we learned through our history lesson. We needed to balance sort of the square footage priorities in the library. So equal space for collections, people sitting and gathering informally, and then also people to gather in groups or more formally. So this concept really drove our early discussions with MCL back in 2021. They had a set square footage for each library set by the bond, but they didn't have a set list of required spaces. So we spent about 3 months working with them to come up with sort of this concept about equal places, equal space for books and people, and that they should prioritize space for people. Next slide. If you look, here's an example of, or here's the image of the interior of Holgate Library that I was referencing. It actually has some like lovely timber roof decking elements. It's a big open space. You know, it is kind of living room-like, but the issue is it is very undersized. It was very undersized. It was 6,000 square feet for a very busy, diverse neighborhood. And there was one tiny meeting room. There was almost double the space for book stacks as there was for seating areas. And so it wasn't really a place that folks could come and stay for any extended amount of time. They came in, they got their book, or they used the computer and they got out. It didn't provide that, even though it was open, it really didn't provide that flexibility of use, good sight lines, or any acoustic privacy for different groups. Throughout the design phases, and especially during the programming phase, we hosted large 40+ person stakeholder meetings virtually on Zoom like this, really leaning heavily on the chat feature and Miro. We would have someone sort of live reading the chat as we went through our presentations and catching comments and repeating them to the presenter and kind of, popcorning back and forth to make it an open dialogue, because folks aren't always willing to jump in when someone's on a long ramble like we are right now. We use these tools to get real-time feedback. We are getting feedback from library staff, the bond management team, and Multnomah County facilities all at once. So there were lots of voices in the room. We unpacked the future forward library one space at a time, from staff to seating areas to program areas to the support, before even putting pen to paper on our design. And the outcome after about 3 months was a really intentional program to serve this specific and unique community while remaining flexible for the future, balancing and prioritizing space for community and patrons over space for book stacks. After that, the wheels turned through schematic design. There was a lot of iteration that we won't dig into, but we formed and came to a clear, navigable spatial organization. The doors at the south and north entries, serving the bus stop on Holgate and also parking to the north, draw you into the central lobby, which is daylit from above with a double height space at the stair. The two-story library, like I mentioned, was new to MCL, except Central Library. And so our solution for that was balancing sort of programming and flex areas, people space and collections, and also space for staff on both floors to provide future flexibility and encourage exploration on both levels. The lobby serves as the true third place in Holgate, right when you walk in the door. It's cozy, a neighborhood scale cafe feel. This was a through line of something we heard from staff and community, folks wanting a place to sit and gather or wait for the bus or people watch, just somewhere where they could walk in the door and not even be interested in a book, but feel like they were in community. And the kids. We did corral the kids to a corner. We put them in the southwest corner, which is amazing. I have 2 toddlers, so I really appreciate the ability to close the door on this area and let them run. It's easy access for strollers. It also blocks, some of the acoustic noise from the big reading room upstairs. And it holds the southwest corner of the building, which provides lots of views of activity in and out and along Holgate. There are adjoinable community rooms that provide space for Lunar New Year, group gatherings, tax help seminars, and much more. It is set up to be accessible after hours for future library use and flexibility. Again, and it finally gives people a space. You know, this room can hold 100 people, or these two rooms together, and to host all those events that they were cramming into the stacks. On the second level, this is the first dedicated teen space in all of the MCL projects, and it really truly has become their third space. It's busy after school and on the weekends, and all summer you'll at least find a couple kids in there doing their homework or playing video games or reading a book. I love this image because it really embraces what teens are all about, which is kind of doing their own thing, but all together. And I feel like this room really supports that. It balances acoustic separation and openness, and gives teens kind of their own place. There's also additional small meeting rooms, as you can see on the right, for telehealth appointments, job interviews, and tutoring sessions as well. And lastly, as you move up to the second level, this is what we've coined the living room. It encourages lingering, exploration, and browsing. Its openness really gives the library future flexibility and clear sightlines across the whole floor. There's still access to technology. That's not going away. People still love to come in, and those desktop computers are always full. This Holgate space planning really demonstrates how thoughtful spatial gradients can support connection, comfort, and belonging for a diverse public. And Jeannie's going to take you through how we engaged with this community and how their voices impacted the project.
Thanks, Emily. Emily talked about the programming phase, which was about 3 months. And during that time, there was extensive community engagement happening. Uh, and we built a team that, you know, really wanting to make sure that the engagement wasn't extractive and just checking out boxes, but really trying to really build from the beginning a real partnership. So the bond project, this was engaging the community and giving the community say within the design of their new libraries was really important. It is a public building. It's publicly funded. So that was really important from the very beginning. And so they hired for the bond a community engagement strategist on their team, and then Bora brought on co-locate. They are an engagement lead for the project, and they really shaped. I want to give them lots of credit. They really shaped the way that the engagement work happened. The other thing worth noting is this project started during the pandemic, so 2021. And so learning how to do this through the pandemic and not having to like have all of the in-person things was really something that I think the team took on, but there was a lot of learning in process for sure. Another great thing that MCL did from the beginning is before they came to us, they created these ethos for the community engagement work very specifically. So that was also helped us and created a North Star for the team. Um, we spent a lot of the very beginning talking about what success looks like for the community engagement piece of it, really understanding collectively, like what are we asking the community? What is actually changeable? If they say something, does that mean we're going to change it? What are the levers? And kind of making that clarity, I think is really important for any project at the beginning who has sort of the ideas of community engagement to really think through those things. And we did that in the beginning, but also like revisit throughout the process. A little bit of background in the neighborhood around Holgate. It serves a couple of neighborhoods that are very diverse for Portland. This is kind of the census data here that you can see the colored dots. But it is one of the most diverse area, um, east of 205. And then you can kind of see even more diversity as you move past 205. It's adjacent to the Jade District, which is one of the Oregon's most culturally diverse corridor, multiple language, um, historically underinvested area, and through the years, lots of displacement and gentrification. So that really, as a team, that was something that we wanted to make sure reaching those who are never been at the table, how do we do that? And really taking that into account as we created a plan for community engagement. So a lot of what we learned was, trying to reach people through the pandemic, especially, we need to work in partnership with organizations who are already doing some of this work with these communities. So we partnered with them. We were certainly not ask people to come to us. And in this case, a Zoom meeting, how are we going to get people to actually come to a Zoom meeting? So we found as many ways as we can possibly do to go to them. So, that meant showing up at farmers markets or, a grocery store that we think people are going to visit. And so just to get as many in contact with as many people as possible. And then lastly, I'll talk about this more later, but we found a way to really take advantage of, not to take advantage of people's time, but to really make sure that we compensate them for their time and their knowledge to help design this library. So, and then this is just a list of the variety of stakeholders that we targeted and reached. Definitely diverse populations, but also we talk to, everybody uses the library, right? So like teens, seniors, people with disabilities, unhoused patrons, everybody that we could find a way to reach was the goal. And then as a result, we did listening sessions, we did pay programs, we did surveys, um, we did do a virtual open house. I will say not that many people came, so we found many ways to engage with people, and ultimately we did get a fair amount of input across through those phases. One thing to note is like, as all of this feedback is coming in, like I think as a design team, as an architecture team, I think we sometimes struggle, right, to really figure out a way to document this. And so Colocate and their team, along with MCL, created the structure of really documenting all of the feedback and be able to put them on spreadsheets and digitize all the comments in one place so that they can be properly analyzed, and then allow us to kind of go back to them and revisit, and also allowed us to really see the themes that really were coming across as different events was happening. So that was really interesting to sort of witness this process of doing that. And then the other note I wanted to make was, you hear a lot of comments from the community, and sometimes they're not always like design implications, right? There's sometimes they don't really know the difference between like what it can affect, their thought can affect the design versus a policy. So we kind of had to also separate that and work with MCL to think about like this is something we can do with the design, but this is actually really a policy implication. So we were able to share those with them as well through this process. And the other kind of commitment we made was to make sure that the community could kind of hear, and with that we would really report back to the community what we did hear and what we did about it, right? So and be kind of honest when we couldn't change something, or maybe we heard some comments, but hey, we actually, MCL can't make this work at this moment in time, and be able to share that transparently. So we did newspapers and other ways to really share that. The website, MCL hosted a website that was continually updated in order to share what was happening with the project. One very unique program that was part of the community engagement is this program called the Community Design Advocates. We went through Colocate, led this application process where we found community members who were being paid in a 5-month program with the design team working with us, and went through a whole selection process I'm not going to dig too much into, but this group, we met with them early before we did anything else. They got design justice training from Holgate. They would work with us in those 5 months back and forth, a lot of, meetings where we would update them on what's happening in design. Maybe we had questions we're wondering about. They would then take that to their community. The goal was that, they have a set of community members that they are or they already know. They and they that those community members would give more honest feedback in a trusted relationship than a design team standing there saying, "Hey, this is what we're doing." So we really wanted to kind of change the dynamics and really build trust with community members. So the community design advocates was a way for us to do that. So they took our sort of design updates and questions, and then they developed their own presentation. They might have taken people out to coffee to ask them those questions. They might have hosted dinners or events. They did, and we supported them. Colocate and MCL supported them through all of those efforts, and then they were able to get us feedback that help us through the process. And I think for me, having this is the first time I was part of something like this, and I think for MCL too, I think it really changed the game on how we can engage with community and also really change that dynamic. Like not this did in the survey feedback from the CDAs who was part of this. I think it really gave them a sense of autonomy and really felt like they were part of the team. And I think that was really special on this project. Another program that we did was called Your Library, Your Voice. It was with teens, so 14 teens. Unfortunately, it had to be a Zoom sessions or 4 Zoom sessions, but we got the teens together. They co-created some community engagements. We did some introduction to what architecture is about, what design justice means, and then they did a few exercises of designing the teen room. So they kind of designed their own space in many ways or gave a lot of inspiration to designing the teen space that Emily mentioned. So the same picture, but just the things that they talked about and influenced the design was, um, they wanted a variety of places. They're like I think Emily said this earlier, teens just like to do their own thing sometimes. And so there were computers with gaming and special software in the room. You're not seeing the big screen. There is a big screen in this room with gaming. They just want a beanbag chairs, comfy, cozy kind of feel, and then tables for people who do want to study in the room. Daylight views was definitely a theme for them, and then so we placed the team on the upper level, sort of at the corner, so you can kind of see into the neighborhood. And then art was another piece that PSAA, Portland Street Alliance, Art Alliance, worked with MCLs and hosted a teen group specifically for that art piece. And then the colors, I think the teens wanted to be separate from the children's colors, and I think they were always kind of tied together in many, often. So they wanted sort of muted tones and a little bit moodier for the teens. Another piece of design outcome, Emily already touched on this a little bit, but we really structured or designed the lobby as a third space. You're not seeing a ton of books right away. Maybe you just want to hang out here, right? Get some food and have, meet up with a friend kind of thing. So we talked a lot about having a cafe in Holgate, but it's just still too small for that to really happen. So we instead of actual cafe, we have some cafe seating in the lobby. You'll notice that the welcome desk is unlike many typical library desks with giant circulation desks. We really try to make it a light touch and really focus on the people. What we heard from community was more often that I want to see the face that greets me more than this fortress that kind of blocks me from away from the librarians. Yeah, artwork, daylight, all of the things, and wayfinding in the library is so critical, especially with knowing all of the the pieces about sort of all the diverse community that's coming in. So all the signage are in the 5 languages that are part of MCL's general policy. Other design outcomes came from community. We talked a lot about restrooms. And of course, moving, restrooms are actually a very critical piece in the library. It's often something that could happen in the bathroom. So librarians are constantly needing to feel safe as they kind of keep track of what's happening and making sure everybody's okay. So we always had 2 ways in and out in the bathroom. We talked about all user bathrooms, both as a multi-stall, individual stalls, and multi-stall scenarios. We learned through engagement that, different religion or cultures might not feel comfortable in an all-user restroom, all-gender restroom scenario. So we actually provided single users as well, along with that to give people options. This is the first time each at Holgate there's the first adult changing table for MCL. So we heard through community feedback that, there are people who have this need and never go out to the anywhere because there's never this opportunity. And so they always have a caretaker and they just, it's really keeps them homebound. So the library being this public free, space for everyone, we really MCL really um, kind of dug into this and providing this in many of their new branches and updates. And I think it's something that actually takes enormous amount of room to make this happen. So this was a investment, I think, in the community. Lactation room and family restrooms are also part of Holgate. And then the other piece, I think this idea that the library is for everyone. So, we wanted to provide a lot of choices throughout the library, not just in like space types and things like that, but also in the collection. So, because this was a diverse community, we did not want to kind of make people feel othered by having to go to an area where, the Asian books are, or Chinese books, or Vietnamese, or whatever. But so really making a blended collection and featuring the We Speak Your Language collection really front and center. So you can kind of see number 5, the orange bubble there. There, like right when you come up, you can easily access those collections as well on the upper level. And then furniture, I think the feedback, people often comment on the immediate things that they interact with in spaces. So the furniture came up a lot as part of the feedback, and so we spent a lot of time really finding the comfortable furniture and giving a variety. So when you go there, you're going to see it's not the same chair because previous to that, MCL had one chair. It was a wooden chair. It was heavy. It was not comfortable, and so we spent a lot of time really providing choices for, adults to kids and just giving people options was really the goal. And often we had to find chairs that, you know, had arms so that, for seniors, that's something that we heard they really would benefit from. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Wee.
Thank you.
We're
Uh,
running a little behind, so Twee, FYI.
Understand. Let's go to the next slide. Yep. Well, just this building was inspired by the butterfly, and we were really inspired by the concept of the butterfly effect, and thinking about that in the context of a library where small act like taking out a book from the library could transform somebody's life. And in that sense, the butterfly come through in this building, both you can see in the footprint with the inflections on the footprint of the building, as well as inside the building, different design elements like the stair screen that you see pictured here was also inspired by the butterfly. Next slide. overall, the material palette, in speaking about biophilic design, are both like physically bio-based material, a lot of wood finishes, natural finishes, and also inspired by the Pacific Northwest nature through colors to texture. Um, the very first goal of this project, early in design, we got together and had a design charrette, and that's with both the folks from the library, other stakeholders, our consultant, and our design team. And the number one goal that came out was everyone wanted quality daylight and views to nature. And in order to achieve that, we had to keep that in mind every step of the way, starting with goal setting and then next slide, um, through early on in design when we're kind of studying different massing. And Emily kind of hinted at this earlier. We have this north-south oriented site. And in scheme A and B, the building would roughly follow that as well. But eventually we decided on going with C for a number of reasons. One, for that civic kind of presence that Emily presented on, but also so that the building itself is oriented east-west, which would enable us to create a fenestration scheme that would bring in daylight without bringing too much solar heat gain. So what that looks like in terms of programming is you can see the areas in gray. We could put opaque functions and programs like the restroom on the west side and the electrical back of house stairs storage space to the east side, and those wouldn't have any glazing, and then keeping most of the windows to the north and south of the building, and doing this help bring in quality daylight without incurring too much solar heat gain, particularly from the western afternoon sun. And once again, you can see that in this section. But what this also illustrates is windows are not enough for when a building is this have this kind of deeper floor plate. So with our desire to provide daylight to all parts of the building, we were studying kind of a top lighting strategy, and that could play out either as a clear story or as a skylight. Next slide. And for that purpose, we use daylight analysis tool, in this case, Climate Studio, to simulate different scenario, and eventually went with a south-facing skylight instead of a clear story, either north or south-facing, because it helped us not only bring daylight into the middle of the floor plate on the second floor, but also particularly down into the ground floor at the bottom of the kind of monument stair that we have in the space, in this double height space. And the other aspect of biophysics design that play out in this building is many different ways we connect people to nature. One of them is actually just great indoor air quality, kind of sufficient fresh air supplied, but also excellent enclosure, which mean less particulates are emitted into the building throughout the use. Next slide. But then also in various spaces, both more public, like the children area, or private, there's this direct visual connection to outside, either looking at sky, trees, the street. Um, but also, if you pay attention, there is operable windows in a lot of these spaces that also improve resilience for the library, which means, in times where maybe there's wildfires or power outage, perhaps not wildfires, but in times of power outage, with the access to daylight and fresh air, the library could still be open. And then um, connection to nature is also just direct connection to outdoor space. And amongst the different outdoor spaces that we provide, some of which are more public facing, like Emily presented on, we also have this great Oasis dedicated staff outdoor space that responded to staff kind of requests that they have space to kind of retreat to since their job is really public facing, and it'd be nice to have kind of like a space to step away from that. Like I hinted earlier, the use of bio-based material, in this case, in particular, mass timber for the main structural system for the building has a lot of benefit and on top of biophilic benefits. So it's reduce embodied carbon, support regional economies, reduce construction time, and cleaner, quieter job site, which goes back to that respect to the really residential neighborhood that we're in. Um, and using mass timber and kind of digging into it with our structural engineer, as well as like engaging Timber Lab really early on, means we can leverage a lot of structural efficiency to further that embodied carbon reduction. So for example, if you see here, this is kind of a exploded axon of a structural bay, a typical structural bay on the first and second floor. On the second floor, we added these girders to increase the column spacing, take away one column per bay. That means increased flexibility for that, what we term earlier, the living room area, right? So down the line, 40, 50 years from now, if the library wants to reconfigure that space, it's a lot more flexible. And then again, working early on with trade partners also mean we get to dial in a lot of the details, like hidden timber connections are fully coordinated ahead of time, which mean cleaner kind of timber aesthetic down the line for folks to enjoy. And then another point on structural efficiency is for the roof deck, we angled it to reduce the amount of tapered insulation quantity, both from a first cost standpoint, but also from an environmental kind of material selection reason. And then the added kind of advantage of that is helping with temporary protection for the mass timber um, in terms of sloping and managing bulk water. And then if you recall, I was saying earlier, based on the massing and the kind of fenestration scheme, we're able to kind of control daylight um, and solar heat gain, which enable us to use radiant system in a lot of spaces in the building. You can imagine with spaces that have too high of peak loads and like is very the load is very variable throughout the day. It's a lot harder to do that. And so here we're able to and also take a lot of early coordination in terms of radiant tubing and conduit routing. Next up. And then for spaces where we do need to run ducts, for example, for air supply, in this case, on the second floor, we carved out the central bay as the systems bay to keep those duct run away from the north and south bay where the people are. And you can see right here the illustration of that in end result, where air is fed north and south from the central bay and keeping the ceiling and the mass timber on the north and south bay clean. Okay, really quick. I'm almost done. And again, the butterfly concept permeates throughout this building. One of the other places that it play out is in the facade design. We were inspired by the coloring of butterfly wings, which if some of you might know, it's not a pigmentation. It's actually a physical property where the scale on the butterfly wing the configuration of it actually bring out the color. And similarly, we wanted to think about our facade as something that is modular with a slight variation, but that is very easy to fabricate, but at the same time create enough variability throughout the days. And so even before we got to choose what color it would be. There were split opinion, obviously, in terms of, well, should it be the Oregon gray or sky, or should it be, Pacific Northwest favorite green color? We already know that that kind of light and shadow play will be part of it. And in order to achieve that, again, early coordination was really important to us. We kind of connected with trade partner early and got dialed in with these custom metal panel profile and got this mock-up done, actually doing uh, CD construction documentation, which is quite rare for projects. And so we work through these two profiles that essentially are mirrored of each other, and get to think through how they're aggregated and arranged on the facade, but also next slide, kind of the detail at the um, horizontal join or the outside corner or the inside corner of the building to make sure that in the end product, everything kind of plays nicely. And now I get to walk you through some outcome images, as you can see, throughout different season or different light condition, and different aspect of the building, north or south or west, the facade really register very differently. And at night, it's kind of just give glow to activities. Thank you.
Thanks, Twee. I'm gonna spend just a few minutes. We wanted to talk a little bit about the public art process. Very early on, this project was dedicated 2% of the budget for public art. MCO engaged the RAC, Regional Arts and Culture Council, to be part of that process and run that process. But for the design team, I think because we knew this very early on, we were able to conceive the idea of the building with art locations in mind. And so, for those of you who might have this opportunity, I think it's really important to do that early, so it doesn't feel like just an added, piece of art, but really, our goal was to really integrate that art. Um, and as part of that process, we worked with art to make sure that the artists also had an engagement community component to their work. So each artist that worked on Holgate also hosted their own events, and they were super fun, just very engaging art making kind of processes. Just more pictures of that. This was a print making one. This was us during the process, like understanding the budget for it and really having conversation with RAC and their project manager to figure out what types of art and where and all of those things were part of the pretty early on design process. I think we identified all these opportunities by mid DD. And then we worked closely with the artists when they were selected by a committee. They got onboarded, and then they had some time to really think through what they wanted to do, um, with the locations. And so there was during CA, Emily and MCL kind of worked with the artists to really figure out the exact, installation. We did mock-ups and all of those things and I think we helped them with renderings because artists aren't usually have that capability to really finalize the artwork. So that this is the sort of final, they're routed into the cement panel that's at the front, north and south, especially this beautiful pattern. And this beautiful pattern was created, as line work on the exterior, but it was actually a broader piece with color that actually became a wall covering that you see in the lobby. And some of that pattern making in the workshops, if you can kind of zoom into areas where you see pattern, those patterns got turned and incorporated into the final piece as well. The other big art installation was on the site. We had a site enclosure, and a mosaic artist kind of came and made that really beautiful piece that you can kind of from the community room see out into. And again, a very participatory artist. literally had community make these, I think one by one. She made these kits and actually allowed everyone to create their own piece. So if you did one of these, you can find it on the wall somewhere. So you can kind of see, the design team got to do this too, so it was really fun. And then you can see the artist Crystal Menace. She's there in the middle waving. She was composing all these different pieces into the final installation. It was super fun. Um, yeah, we have a few minutes for questions. Holgate, it was a pleasure to work on. We had a lot of great fun. It was the first library out of the bond, so there was a lot at stake there, and we're just really we're a little over a year since it's been open, and we found out that the numbers of visits has really almost tripled. So we're really proud of that. Yeah, that's our presentation. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, turn off the presentation and see if there's any questions.
There's one in the chat. It was about compensation for the community engagement for the CDAs. Do you want to touch on that, like how it worked?
Oh, yeah, because this was a public entity, MCL would have a hard time paying people individually. So we actually took that on as part of the design team, or actually co-locate was part of that. Like there was a bucket of money that were given. It was all clearly defined, and they were able to actually submit that and pay them, and then get reimbursed from MCL from the bond.
Was that for the group that you were talking about earlier, the community members that went out and did their own?
Yes, they were paid. I don't remember the amounts top of my head, but they were paid consistently in the 5 months, and then they also got a stipend to like do the actual activity. So like if they got a fixed amount to be like, oh, you can use this for coffees or whatever you want to do, host an event. So yeah, they got a little bit of both. So it wasn't coming out of their stipend. They got paid for their time.
Well, I'm seeing lots of great comments about your project. So thank you very much for this presentation.
Yeah, pleasure to do it. Any other last minute questions? I think we're at time, so I want to respect that too. Thank you everybody for joining us.
And this recording will be available by tomorrow. I'll let you guys know where it is.
Great.
Thank
Thanks
you so much.
all.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.